It's that time of year again. Early career psychologists are in hot demand. Private practice is offering opportunities, government is offering opportunities, the NGO sector, the NDIS space. Lots of people are reaching out and looking for early career psychologists to fill the workforce shortages. If you're sitting there with a Master's of Psychology and looking for your first job opportunity, you need to be really cautious and judicious as you think about what are the best opportunities for you. I've made this video because one of the questions that I see coming up all the time is what's a fair split? Should I be being paid 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 100%? And the answer to that question is not as simple as it seems because it all depends on the model. If you've never worked in private practice or in fact never worked professionally as a psychologist before, it can be really hard to evaluate that stuff. So today I'm going to try and demystify and we're going to think about the big questions here. The first one, how hard are you going to work and how much money are you going to earn? So let's start off by thinking about the different models that are out there. There are effectively three models for engagement of psychologists. The first is an employment model. The second is a contractor model, and the third is a room rental model. And I've arranged them in that order for a particular reason, because in ascending order, they represent typically more money, more autonomy, and more risk. And what I mean by that, the employment model is lower risk. It also requires you to do things the way another company has set them up for you. And it gives you a lower degree of risk. If no clients show up, you still get paid. However, in a room rental model, you are effectively a business with a lease and you can fail. Having said that, if you can make it succeed, it might also be the most lucrative option. So I really want you to keep these three models in mind. An employment offer where you are guaranteed $90,000, $100,000, $120,000, plus superannuation, plus holidays, plus sick pay, plus training, plus salary sacrifice and all of the other bits and pieces, versus a room rental model where you're guaranteed nothing, but you have the potential to make more money. So why might contracting not actually be as lucrative as people think? Now, one of the problems that people have when they think about this is that they use this interesting math. They decide, all right, I'm going to start with the APS rate. The APS rate is $311 an hour, and I'm going to see 6 clients a day, 5 days a week, and I'm going to work 48 weeks per year. Therefore, I'm going to make $440,000 every year. And then they go and look at an employment offer where you're being offered 110 and go, why would I work for a quarter of the amount of money when I could be out there in private practice making a fortune? Now, let's get real. None of us are earning $400,000 a year, and there's a really good reason. Firstly, you absolutely have to factor in that there's going to be a 20% no-show rate. You cannot assume that you're going to see 30 clients a week. You are going to burn out, okay? Especially as an early career psych where you've got to do a lot of preparation, a lot of planning. So it's more realistic that you can see 20 to 25 clients a week. Now, we're going to have that 20% no-show rate, maybe another 20% who are going to late cancel. If you're booked heavily, you're not going to have the opportunity to phone up those clients and phone up the people on your wait list and optimize your diary. Having a good reception team or admin staff who are doing that for you is going to increase your income. But if you're working in a room rental where you're your own business, you're going to have to pay for that admin person to do that. So suddenly that $440,000 is coming down by turnover, and it's coming down because you're having to pay for an admin person. Similarly, if you're in a contracting arrangement, if the contract is just giving you a couch and Wi-Fi, that might be worth a slightly different percentage than if they are offering you a fantastic admin team who are going to work really hard to optimize your diary. Now, other reasons why the $400,000 is not realistic. You can't see that many clients and keep up on top of your paperwork. Secondly, no one turns up in January. Okay, you're not going to work 48 weeks a year. You're actually going to work more like 40 weeks a year. The first 3 weeks of January are a complete write-off. Do not assume you're going to see anyone. The last week of December, also a complete write-off. Don't assume you're going to see anybody. Holidays, Easter holidays. You should absolutely assume that half of your clients are going to cancel because they forgot that they made plans. June, July, there is going to be an outbreak of norovirus or rotavirus, and all of your clients are going to stay home with vomiting and diarrhea. And you're going to be happy that they stay home because you don't want to get the vomiting and diarrhea. So we need to reduce what our expectations of our actual output. Now we plug in more like 20 to 25 clients, reduced by 20% or so late no-shows, late cancellations, plus only working 40 weeks a year. Now, the real possible turnover is more like 200,000. Now, there's a difference between turnover and profit, okay? That's like Apple saying we sold $1 billion worth of iPads. They didn't make $1 billion profit because they still had to pay to have the iPads made. They still had to pay to have the iPads shipped to all of the different countries. They still had to pay for the Apple Store to look pretty and to convince people to go and buy the iPads. So we're talking turnover that's more like 200,000 if you are entirely a small business. And then it's going to come down to your business efficiency and your relational acumen and skills to see how much money do you need to spend in order to achieve that $200,000 turnover. Contracting is a middle ground. Okay, contracting is a middle ground. At the one extreme, you've got the room rental, where you are basically a business who is leasing space from another business, and you have to make your psychology practice work on its own. At the other extreme, you've got employment, where a company is setting up all of this infrastructure, they're getting the clients for you, and they're paying you to do the work. Like I said, typically higher risk, higher reward over at the business side, lower risk, lower reward at the employment side. Contracting is the middle ground. Many psychologists in Australia are employed on contractor arrangements. What that means is that they are working for another business and they are contracted to provide a service for that business. I see so many psychologists get themselves in trouble because they don't understand what a contract is. A contract is a legal document. Okay? You, Aaron Frost Proprietary Limited, are entering into a contract with Psychology Enterprises Proprietary Limited. You do not have any protections. They can fire you in the same way that you would fire a plumber who's not doing a good job. Okay? It's a contracting relationship. You need to read the contract. And there's going to be some clauses in that contract that you're not necessarily going to like. So let's have a look at what are some of the clauses that you might at least want to think about. The first one is non-compete clauses. Typically, the way that a non-compete or a restraint of trade is how they're often referred to, clause works, is an exclusion by both time and geography. What the practice owner is trying to prevent is you getting a full caseload and then setting up a new practice just over the road for yourself. It is reasonable for a practice owner to set up a non-compete clause that kind of works in a tiered way. For 1 year, maybe they say they don't want you working within 5 kilometres. For 2 years, they don't want you working within 3 kilometres. And for 4 years, they don't want you working within a kilometre. So the longer away from the end of the contract, the closer you're allowed to work. By the way, those non-compete clauses will also have things in there about not poaching staff, not poaching admin staff, not taking your clients with you. Now, I see on Facebook all the time people saying things like, you can sign a non-compete clause and they are not enforceable legally anyway. Firstly, stop taking legal advice from Facebook forums. In fact, there was a high-profile case in 2025 where a health practitioner had a restraint of trade clause enforced against them by the courts. It's expensive for the business to do that, and many businesses will choose to let it go because they basically decide they don't want the drama. But if you've signed a contract, you are running the risk of not being able to practice your trade. The non-compete clause needs to be reasonable. If the person says, I don't want you working for 5 years within a 20-kilometre radius, the court might consider that that's not reasonable. But that's where you need legal advice. You need to talk to a lawyer, or you need to look at the clause, and on the face of it, you think that you're comfortable with that, and then abide by the terms of the contract that you signed up with. Secondly, loyalty periods. In a lot of other industries, it's really common that people will say things like, this comes up in accountancy all the time. We will pay for you to do all of the things for you to get your certified practice accountancy certificate. Or in law, we will pay for all of the things that are required for you to get your articles. But we expect you to be loyal and stay with our business for 2 years or 5 years. And if you don't, you have to pay back the training and expertise that has gone into you gaining that qualification. We're seeing that very commonly, or increasingly commonly in psychology, both around registrar training, so the 2-year clinical registrar program, or Ed and Dev or neuropsych registrar program, and around the internship itself, so the 2-year qualification to become a registered psychologist. The cost of delivering that training typically runs to $15,000 to $30,000, depending on whether we're talking about an internship or a registrar, depending on the cost of supervision, the cost of CPD. You don't want to be in a situation where you are working for a business that you don't like, but if you leave, you've got a $15,000 bill. Now, it's not unreasonable for businesses to put those loyalty periods and training clawback clauses in there. However, if you're planning on leaving, or you're planning on moving states, or you're planning on this only being a temporary 12-month period, you might want to choose, of the different offers that are available to you, not to sign the one with a clawback, or to talk really honestly about the practice owner to talk with the practice owner about the concerns that you've got. The next one that might be a red flag for people, intellectual property. It's not uncommon for clauses within employment contracts or service contracts to say things like, if you develop intellectual property, that will become the property of the business. Why does that matter? Well, let's say you write a parenting group. You're really passionate about the use of mindfulness in parenting, and you write a mindfulness parenting group. If you leave, do you have the right to keep using that group? Does the practice have the right to take that group from you and to run it with another practitioner as the head? None of these things are right or wrong, but that's how contracting works. You need to negotiate with the practice owner to determine what you and they think is reasonable. The next one that often catches people out, payment terms. It's not uncommon for contractors to only be paid monthly. If you're expecting to be paid weekly or expecting to be paid fortnightly, you need to think about talking to the business owner about that, or reshuffling your expenses to make sure that your rent is paid monthly. And if you can't sort out for your rent to be paid monthly, you need to budget. So think about, when are you expected to get your invoice in, and how long until you get paid? Contractors get a surprise if they don't keep on top of their paperwork and they don't issue their invoices, then they don't get paid. And it might not be possible for the business to do another pay run for another month. So have a look at those payment terms. Have a look at what the expectation is. If the expectation is that you will get your invoice in 5 days after the end of every month, make sure you get your invoice in 5 days by the end of the month, or you might not be getting paid 10 days at the end of the month. Finally is superannuation, and this is a really vexed issue. My understanding is that contractors are currently required to be paid superannuation. Having said that, I am aware that that is complex, based on structures, legal advice, financial advice, etc., etc. But you need to consider, are you being paid superannuation? If you're young right now, superannuation might seem like the least interesting thing in the world, but getting another $10,000 every year thrown into a bank account that is accumulating interest and growth for you for the next 40 years, trust me, 50-year-old you who is planning retirement or starting to think about preparation for retirement will be very thankful that you thought about your superannuation options right up front at this early stage in your career. Okay, Now, let's think about this issue of what is a fair split. The answer that I'm always going to give here is it depends. It really depends on what you're being offered. 50-50 and 60-40 are very common splits within the industry. If what is being included for you is Wi-Fi, a couch, and a desk, I've got to say, handing over 50% of that is looking pretty stingy. If what is being included for you is full admin support and they're optimizing your diary for you, you've got parking, you're being given good CPD, you're being given good supervision, you can phone somebody up in case you've got someone who's suicidal, you're being given mentoring opportunities, there's staff amenities, great location, then actually 50-50 is pretty reasonable. So don't just think about the split. You need to think about what are you being given for the split and what would it cost you in order to provide all of those things for yourself if you went down the more extreme option and just ran your own business out of a room that you had rented. Final thing that I would point out here in terms of split doesn't determine money. It might seem like it does. 60-40 split, you're going to make more money on 60% rather than 50%, right? Wrong. Okay, if you want the highest split in Australia, go and get a job at Headspace. Headspace is going to give you 80-20 tomorrow. Now, why is everyone not working at Headspace? Firstly, it's bulk billing. Secondly, half of your clients are going to no-show. Okay, now start with the bulk billing and then assume that only half of the people are going to turn up. The amount of money in your pocket is actually going to be comparable to working at McDonald's. And I say that with all due respect. I'm not trying to have a go at Headspace. I'm just literally using it to point out that an 80% split is not the most money. You actually need to think about what is being billed, what percentage of clients are actually going to show up, and what's the average billing. Because if the expectation is we charge $300 an hour, but we expect all children to be bulk billed, then your average fee is not $300 an hour. So think about the average fee, think about how many people actually turn up, and think about what support you're actually being given. If you're interested, down in the description, my wife Rebecca pulled together a little Excel spreadsheet, which I think we sell relatively cheaply, but we'll have a discount code down there for people if you would like to try and evaluate different offers against each other. Finally, are there any other factors that you should consider? Yeah, there are. Firstly, career trajectory. If your goal is that you want to be an academic, think about things that are going to let you collect data. Think about places that are going to let you work with the client population that you're interested in. Ditto opportunities. While I'm saying that working for the public sector might not be the most lucrative, actually there might be some great opportunities, senior site positions, directors of department positions. If that's the kind of work that is attractive to you, then don't rule out any possibilities based on just what is the largest presumed income. Third, stability, the financial health of the business as well. What happens if the business fails? What happens if it's a tiny company who can't keep on top of their paperwork? I've certainly worked for I've had a number of registrars who I've been supervising when the practice has failed. And often their final invoice isn't paid, their superannuation hasn't been paid, they can't access all of their client notes, the company just disappears off the face of the earth. So think about stability, both in terms of the financial health of the business, but also for your financial stability. A lot of you at this stage of your life are thinking about things like having children, getting mortgages. Sometimes it is easier to get a mortgage if you know how much money you're going to be paid each fortnight. So think about what you actually need. Fourth, team culture. Okay, working with a great group of colleagues who are smarter than you is an amazing way to start your career. Don't just look for the top dollars, look for people who you want to be your peers. And then finally, risk of burnout. It doesn't matter how much someone's offering you if you're going to burn out before Christmas. What are the KPIs? What are the client group that you're working with? If you're working with everybody who has complex trauma and is acutely suicidal, you're going to find that that's really exhausting. So who's the clients that you're working with? How many of those clients are you expected to see? And this might sound like it's a really obvious one, but travel time. Over the years, I've lost a number of contractors simply because they've wanted to work for us. We're a great fit for them, but they live 45 minutes away. 45 minutes plus peak hour traffic twice a day gets old real quick. So have a think about the logistics of how much is it going to cost you, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time as well, in order to work for the business. Look, I hope this has been helpful. I really just want to wish all of you the very best looking at the job offers that are coming up over the course of the next few weeks and next couple of months. And feel free to reach out to either Rebecca or I. One of the great things about being in the roles that we're in at the moment, we do actually have the time to talk with people, and we're both really passionate about supporting early career psychologists. So if you've got a question that we can answer, flick us a quick email and we'll try and get in touch. Take care and good luck.